Thanks. Hi, I'm Sherman Gomberg. So welcome to Team Development Model. Today we're going to focus on forming an agile team, which is part of the model from forming, storming, norming, performing, as we look to create high-performing teams over time. So it's first developed by Bruce Tuckman. He did this in 1965 to create these group stages. He added a fifth stage, which is very interesting, and I don't hear many people talk about it, but it is about a journey after we go through the 4 stages. Our forming phase is all about coming together. So I love this picture. Hopefully you guys do too. We establish to embark on a new journey, sort ourselves out, address that uncertainty, get to know each other. What are we like, right? And we relinquish our individual comfort. Favorite quote of mine, Shanae Agumike from Los Angeles Sparks: true teams are made when you put aside individual wants for the collective good. Go Dodgers. As we look through team formation, we're going to take a look at 11 steps in our ways of working for forming a team. We'll form the Agile team embarking on their journey, stakeholders, vision, team, mission, team name, agreement, training environment, and we'll look at definition of ready, done, and product backlog. Let's take a look at the stakeholders. Our stakeholders, they're vested in the interest we work. So we need to figure out who they are when we form a team. Identify those stakeholders. Are they committed to the success of us? Are they going to be blockers? So as we form, we want to be able to understand our stakeholders. Next, we want to look at a vision statement. What is our vision statement for our team? We need a team vision statement. A lot of times we have organization and product, but we want to look at a team. How are we going to make a difference? What is our goal? We want to look at the characteristics of a particular team. How are we going to get to be self-organizing? We need to look, what skills do we need to be cross-functional? Do we have all those skills necessary? Who's on the team? What's the members? Are we the right size? Who's going to be our guide as we go through this? We want to build a mission statement. A mission statement gets more tactical, defining our journey. What is the product or service we're fulfilling? How are we going to measure our success? As we hit our 5th step, a really cool thing to do is identify our team name. We need to be creative. What is our DNA? Let others know who we are. Are we going to be scrummy bears? Are we going to be meerkats? What are we going to be? Let's be creative. Working agreement, all for one, one for all. Alexander Dumas, Three Musketeers, right? How are we going to find our way of working? What's our disciplines? How will we be self-organized? What happens when things don't go well? Build that working agreement. What training might we need? We have to look at our skills that we have when we form as a team and identify what knowledge might we need to gain. What training do we have? Can we teach each other? What learning will help us accelerate and grow as we formed our team? Environment. What's our actual environment look like? Is it physical? Is it virtual? What tools might we need? Right? Are we going to have certain equipment? What's the workspace? Are there chat tools? We want to identify and come up with that environment to move us forward. We need to define a definition of ready. How do we know we are ready as we prepare for our journey? What is in there? What's our product or service? Are those items going to be small enough to get us started? Can we build these things that we're looking to build? We are the builders. Can we obtain feedback? And how do we measure to get value in the items? On the other side, how do we know we get done? What's our target we're trying to achieve? We need to ship this. We need to know it can be delivered. And what does done mean to you? The team needs to define what is done. The 11th item in our steps, and the last one, is fulfilling our mission statement with a product backlog. As we formed a team, we need a backlog that will help us achieve outcome. We're always focusing on that, making sure we have the right feature to be built, it's accepted, and we can decide what we're going to do now and what to do later. All right, guys, we have just formed a team through 11 steps. You guys are in the ready, set, go phase as we went through stakeholders, vision, team, mission, team name, agreement, training, environment, ready, done, and we created a backlog. In our team development, we're back at the beginning, right? Oh, last thing, sorry, last slide we do have here. We need to be ready for that storm. So a lot of times we're gonna hit that storm after we form. The storm, the team does a little bit less, doing this over time, right? If we are guided, sometimes we can avoid that storm and get right to norm. That's something we can hit next. We're always looking at that norming. How can we start to accelerate? We want to look and to get to that norming phase. It's an awesome place to be. When teams get there, they really feel empowered and they can grow and go. And as we hit the final phase in our team development model, we start to look to be a high performing place. We are that cheetah running through there. We're looking, we can run autonomously. We don't need that guide anymore. We just need to be course corrected once in a while. High performing teams sometimes bounce back and forth between norming and performing, but they're always looking for a way to sustain that performing phase in the team development model.
All right, that was the last slide. Thank you. Let's give a hand for Sherman. Let's do a quick Q&A. Any questions anybody want to ask? And feel free to pose anything, either via the chat or through unmute yourself. Any questions for Sherman?
I'm well open for feedback too. Yeah.
Sherman, out of these steps, which ones are the most important to you from your experience that are the most critical?
Oh, working agreement.
Yeah,
I think a working agreement is probably the most important. Without that, people start finger pointing and they have a hard time actually sticking as a team. I've seen teams fall apart before they finish forming. But my most fun one is, of course, creating a team name that is really cool. I had an internship team over the summer for my company. They came up with a name. They called themselves the Space Dinos, which was just so cool and awesome. They actually made T-shirts. They made one for me. It's got they drew it and they designed it really cool. So a team name can really power them forward. It's amazing how simple that is, but it's pretty cool.
I have a question. I'm doing a liftoff with a new team at the beginning of November. Do you have any tips for remote forming?
Same thing with this forming model here. So, you know, like many of you, we've all been working virtually since about March 13th. That was pretty much the last day everybody was on site. And I formed a couple teams with my client, do it virtually, get them on video. That should be part of their ways of working, their environment. You know, make sure we're on video. We can improve that communication. Go through this and revisit it and know that, hey, we're going to hit a storm. Make that storm okay for them. Hey, guys, we're forming here. We're going to hit some storm. We'll get through that. But let's work in this model and find a way of keep moving forward and get to that norming phase, which starts to become pretty enlightening.
Thank you.
What step do you think teams typically spend too little effort on?
You spend too little effort on. When they hit really the storming phase, which is the next one, they spend too little effort trying to get to norming. Basically, they just start pointing fingers and stuff, and they slide back to forming. That's usually what I see is they'll hit that storm and they don't like it, and then they go back to forming. Sometimes you lose members of it, or the team disbands, or they're not true to their mission. So having that mission and vision of what it is, what we want to do, what our backlog is for this team, that will help the team move forward and get through that storm. I do see a question posted in chat. I'll take that one. What is the shortest time you have seen a new team get to performing? I'm just going to answer that with my internship team over the summer. I mean, wow, they were there in days. There's just something about college students. I don't know what it is. They're just, they're just eager. They're growing. They're excited. They can't wait to start this new journey. So forming them, they just kind of got this by the third day and really hit that norming phase. They got to performing probably within, I'll say maybe 2 weeks, as they kind of had to learn agility also. So it probably was about 2 weeks. That's probably the fastest I've actually seen.
All
How
right.
would it be like normal or forecasted for a team on a fairly complex mission?
Can you repeat the question? I cut off your first few words. I apologize.
That was how fast the team would go through the forming. How would be like a normal expectation for a team to get through the forming process with a virtual setting and fairly complex tasks?
Sure. If they use this forming as an agile team model here, this really helps them get to the storm pretty quickly, which is what I like here. Otherwise, they kind of fluster figuring out how are we formed, what is our team. So we really want to get to that storm quickly. So I want to see that, and then we can kind of guide through. Often, and this I've seen, often if the team is guided by a scrum master, an agile coach, a servant leader, if they're guided by that, they can skip the storm. This happens quite a bit. I've read a few studies on that where teams can go from forming to norming and avoid the storm because they have the mentorship and guiding to go. So shout out to all my agile coaches. Go coaches.
All right. With that, let's give Sherman a nice round of virtual applause. All right. Thank you,
Thank you,
Sherman.
everybody. Appreciate it.
So let's get rolling with my topic. It's being near enough is good enough. So it's good enough, hi. And so how we don't want to be that guy who isn't happy unless he gets a perfect score all the time. So that's my topic for today. But hey, it's important for us to frame the discussion for tonight. So near enough might not be good enough in all these circumstances. Well, I can think of surgeries, vaccine research, throwing, darts, airplane rocket design, or meeting expectations of your mother-in-law if you're a woman, or father-in-law if you're a man, right? So near enough is not good enough there. Instead, we are going to be focusing on individuals and teams' obsession with perfectionism, right? The feeling that we are not good enough or the things that we do isn't perfect yet for us to show to the rest of the world, right? So we want to be pursuing excellence, which is a gratifying journey, and not perfection, which is neurotic. Okay, so let's define perfectionism, right? So there's a big definition there. Wikipedia says it's a personality trait, blah, blah, blah. And well, what it eventually means is that perfectionism is a form of self-sabotage. It's a delay tactic that we use, is what Wash says. And perfectionism isn't a behavior, it's a way of thinking about yourself. So what causes this, right? So the Superman syndrome, right? So sensationalism of success and failure around us. So perfect looking athletes. We also had somebody say perfect today, right? And flawless supermodels, the advertising on diets, the need to be perfect, and the sensationalism of success and failure around us. So that's the Superman syndrome, right? And also the cultural and social expectations. So around us, we hear things like, oh, the meal was cooked to perfection, the music was pitch perfect, and then the age-old adage, right? Practice makes a man perfect. And if you're Chandler, gum would be perfection, right? So even when we ask something, we always say perfect. So yeah. And last but not the least, the fear of disappointment, disappointing us and others around us. The inability to accept failure and limitation, again, ties it back with the Superman syndrome and our innate need to avoid disappointment. So we want to be perfect because we want to avoid all these three things, right? Okay, so what are some of the traits of perfectionism or being in a not good enough zone, right? So the major ones are inaction, procrastination, because we don't want to do something that isn't going to be perfect, and we fear failure, right? And the other things are, like, we set unrealistic standards, being highly critical of ourselves. Even if we are making progress, we fear just learning stuff, right? And what are the types of perfectionism? Self-oriented, like holding yourself to highly impossible standards. So if you see here, I'm a big fan of Friends. So I'll try to find in a Monica reference here and there. So, I mean, it's basically like being Monica, right? So that's self-oriented perfectionism. And the next type is other-oriented. So again, a Monica reference here. So holding others to impossibly high standards, like the expectation I said, like every mother-in-law has on a daughter-in-law. Well, at least in my culture, but the more I talk to people, the more I understand that it's a universal thing. So this can get annoying to the point where you might be called a fusspot. Well, I couldn't find a Monica reference here, but what will others think of me, right? But because Monica is a self-perfectionist, so I mean, nobody else forced her to be perfect. But again, this is magnified by the phrases like, oh, she is a stickler for perfectionism and those kind of things, right? So we are always thinking, what will others think of me? And we're jailed by that. So what happens? So is that there is this vicious cycle of perfectionism. Okay, you want to pursue perfectionism, but you realize that you can never get there. And then you start feeling crap about yourself. And then again, you said, okay, I must do better. So this continues on, and we always are in the not good enough zone, right? So let's introduce the concept of ish. So ish is a suffix that says, oh, are you hungry? Yeah, I'm hungry-ish, I'm done-ish, right? So there are three zones here. Great hope. Well, you start with your vision, you do great work. That's the grown zone, right? For a perfectionist, doing great work is a grown zone. And then the great waste. So, I mean, the law of diminishing returns applies there. So anything you do after that, nothing works. So getting over perfection, self-care, tell yourself it's okay not to be perfect. Experiment. What will happen if you just release something that's not perfect yet? You'll probably get feedback. So that's precisely what Agile is all about, right? Working in small sense and getting feedback. And then change that age-old adage. It's not practice makes perfect. Let's focus on practice making progress, right? It makes progress. Try to focus on small wins and the journey in itself. Perfection is an illusion and progress is what matters, right? So embrace our failures and embrace our imperfections. So again, take the good enough road, right? So the good enough road looks like this. Strive for excellence and improvement and not perfection. Set nearer goalposts, celebrate your success. And the more you think about near-term goals and celebrate success, the more you'll go to your longer-term goal, right? So start celebrating those small wins. And here again, so how can we overcome perfectionism? How can I get to the good enough zone, right? So know your focus, know the standard required, know when to start and stop, work on small increments and let it be good enough, right? Pursue excellence and not perfectionism. And the concept of ish life, I read this book, which is pretty good. I like that. So I mean, it says practice an ish life, which is about caring less about more, caring more about less, reward your effort and progress, and setting good enough standards that not like striving for perfectionism. And again, imperfect action always triumphs over perfect inaction. So, I mean, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I should admit that. My wife calls that OCD, but I wouldn't go that far. And there's always also a recovering perfectionist manifesto. I would ask you to go look there. And if you want to connect with me, here's my email address and my LinkedIn profile. So awesome. That's the last slide. And if you didn't see that already, I just got 19 slides. So that's near enough. Not 20, near enough. I got 19 slides.
Yay. Thank you, Prasanna. Questions? 3 minutes for questions.
I have 2 questions. It's Liana. One question, how do you deal with perfectionism when it's caused by by the society around you? And 2, if it's this easy, how come so many psychologists have the work of doing the work they do when they work with people that are perfectionists?
Well, Lena, I never said it's easy. I said I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? So I've been going through that myself, like trying to tell myself that it's okay to be good enough. Sometimes I feel I do things badly just to get feedback, right? So I don't want to be that person who is always like focusing on everything to the dot, right? So it is really, difficult thing to do. There's a lot of coaching available. I also worked with Hui on one of the coaching sessions. I plan to continue on that. So working with the coach definitely helps, and you need to change the habit little by little. Again, don't strive for perfection. change your habits little by little, reward your success, motivate yourself, and continue to do that. So the social pressure, I mean, the culture that I come from, there's immense social pressure, right? But you need to tell yourself that the voice that I don't want others to be, I'm not like wanting to think what others think of me. It's rather what I think of myself and what I can do better the next time around, right? So it's difficult. It's not easy. It takes a lot of time.
I honestly feel like it's a little misleading to mental health. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Perfectionism is definitely, the thought of being perfect all the time, or wanting to be perfect all the time, is definitely one of the major mental health issues around the world. So it has been researched, and that's why I picked this topic. It's more about talking to myself, right? So I'm talking to myself, reinforcing to myself that you don't have to be perfect.
Any other questions for Prasanna?
Okay.
Not so much a question, but maybe just chiming in on the last question. I liked what you said about setting the good enough standards before you start the work, because as I'm getting into the work, I'm usually changing the goalpost as I progress.
Right.
Who hasn't done that before?
Everybody does it, right? So I mean, that's the thing. Like mostly it's social pressure. So I mean, it's about like setting us good enough standards and then trying to meet it, and then get feedback, and then if you want to go further, or if you are good enough, then you're good enough, right? So.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Olsen, and I'm joining from Boston. Because of my Sufi and Buddhist backgrounds, I have been learning to discover myself and self-coaching. That's why I would love to talk about the relationship between personal boundaries and self-coaching. So we are all familiar to the personal boundaries, but let's remember what it is. Personal boundaries are the limits and rules we set for ourselves within our relationships, even when people have a hard time accepting them. So our boundaries are matter, and we have two types of boundaries. The first one is internal, and second one is external boundaries. We mostly know and talk about our external boundaries, and we tell that a person with healthy boundaries can say no to others. With internal boundaries, how about ourselves? Can we say easily no to ourselves? How about internal boundaries? They pertain to our mental and emotional worlds. These limits regulate how we think and feel. It helps us to view feedbacks as data, believe our abilities to grow, experience emotions, reach personal experience. Broadly speaking, a boundary defines a limit. Personal boundaries outline our desires, needs, and preferences, serving as invisible but symbolic fences to improve our self-trust. Then it nurtures self-trust and our identity. Actually, internal boundaries protect ourselves from ourselves. So protect from our preferences, our own biases, our desires, cognitive biases, our limiting beliefs and fears. Because the worst enemy we can meet will always be ourselves. It is kind of self-discovery, being familiar to ourselves and facing with our inner personality. I love the quote of Chinese philosopher Lao, knowing others is wisdom. Knowing yourself is enlightenment. Do we prefer to learn more about others or ourselves? Setting boundaries is knowing who we are, what is important to us, our preferences, which option is better for our life. Are we familiar to our biases? Are we caring too much? Do we know how to keep balances in the life? And coaching is all about supporting and challenging a client, being a mirror to the client. It is like being on a seesaw. But are we only playing the game with our clients? How about ourselves? And especially with ourselves too. How much do we look at the mirror to see ourselves? Rumi is one of the inspirational scholar for me, and he says that life is a balance between holding on and letting go. Because life is different than coaching. That's why we need self-coaching to remind this to us instead of racing with the life all the time. Isn't it so selfish? However, if we do not give the value to ourselves, no one is going to give. Before we starting the self-coaching, we create boundaries to protect our energy. Then listen to this energy. Finally, surround yourself with the people who match your inner intentions. We said that it is all about knowing who we are. And Rumi continues to inspire us. Yesterday, I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today, I am wise, so I'm changing myself. Change starts within us. Self-coaching starts with strengthening our internal boundaries. So let's talk about the very simple self-coaching model. We'll learn 5 things. First thing they teach us, there are things in the world you cannot control and that you need to accept them. There are circumstances in the world that we cannot control, such as family, environment, etc. The second thing that they teach us is that our attitude matters. What we think matters. And we should think positively. Just mind our mind. Be mindful. Doesn't get hooked by negativity. Think positive thoughts. Be happy and happy. Third, we have to feel our feelings. We have to find out what our feelings are. And we have to feel them now. This is important because if we don't feel our feelings, we end up drinking a lot, eating a lot, overworking, over Facebooking, because we are trying to avoid feeling any kind of emotion. The fourth thing that they teach us is that we have to take action. Stop procrastinating. Go take action in the world. When you are feeling angry, what you might do. When you are feeling caring, what you might do. The last thing they teach us is that we should set big goals for our life. We should create big results in our life, possible goals in our life. Finally, our lives are getting better and better and better. So it is very easy with these 5 steps. The only thing we cannot control in this model is circumstances, and all of them trigger each other. So thoughts trigger feelings, feelings, emotions drives our actions, actions trigger results. It is kind of coaching loop for ourselves. At the end, no one knows us better than ourselves. All the time, what we seek is seeking ourselves. When we found ourselves, we can change everything in our life and we'll be free. Finally, I just want to close my presentation with the quote, which is my favorite. Every man and woman is born into the world to do something unique and distinctive. If he or she doesn't do it, it will never be done. So let's do it together. And first, be a coach to ourselves and others. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Olsen. Beautiful talk. Let's
Thank
do
you.
the question round. Anybody feel free? Anyone have any questions from Olsen? Is that a hand up, Volker, or are you just clapping?
So thanks, Rui, inviting, and thanks everyone for listening again.
Yeah, I especially, I just wanted to reflect. I really like see, I have it in front of me, even though it's not shared to you all anymore. I really like that graphic that you found about the impossible, that I'm possible. Mm-hmm. It's a very, a lot of very powerful undercurrent messages there. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else reflect? Doesn't have to be a question. Any reflections? What does it resonate with you?
So, I mean, this is self-coaching, right? Another thing that you could do to beat the perfectionism stuff. So, pretty much, right? So, I mean, kind of, pretty good follow-up, right? So,
yeah.
Oh, we got more where that's come from. Anyone else?
Just my reflection is that I don't think anyone talks about this level of personal mastery enough at work.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. Nice job. Also.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-awareness, self-coaching. Yeah, totally.
Is there any recommended sort of follow-up? Like, what are there any resources or books or some other online YouTube videos we should be looking at and keep going with the self-coaching?
Actually, I have been practicing the couple of Sufi practices in my life, and I merged the Buddhism practices, kind of the meditation, etc. And for my coaching skills, I have been using different kind of things, like walking in the woods and trying to listen to sounds. Like I spent around maybe 60 minutes and try to catch the different sounds in the woods, like the birds, animals, etc. Actually, it's really helped me to understand the people in the room, for example, while coaching the people or through Zoom. Instead of just listening, I try to hear that person's feeling. Actually, these kind of things really help me. Or like waking up at 3 a.m. while everybody is sleeping, just trying to catch the world. Because the world is turning around, right? It never stops. Agile is change and being flexible. That's why I'm also trying to change instead of stopping at night too.
So also now you're speaking like in a way, getting to a deeper, like kind of reflecting what you're saying, it's like getting to a deeper level of listening. Is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yeah. As an example of just one coaching skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting. Like maybe that's for a future Pecha Kucha talk for you to talk about, like, you know.
Sure.
So, all right.
So you can connect me through LinkedIn, Olsen Turan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be happy to share maybe a couple of resources through LinkedIn or email.
And I'll mention Olsen, if you happen to have something that you want to share, feel free to pop it into the chat. That's totally great too. So that's a follow-up too. Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's give Olsen a virtual round of applause. Thank you. Great talk. Awesome. All right.
So Total Brain Coaching is about unlocking your full potential. It's an open source system for effective and holistic habit change. And there are 7 principles that we'll go through, and there are tools from those 7 principles, and you build protocols in using those tools. So why did we create Total Brain Coaching? Because agile transformations are really hard. It's really hard to go from doing something 30 years and changing cultures. And so that's why I worked with my dad to try to build this system. My dad's a neuroscientist. I also have a neuroscience background. And we basically, cultures are made of people, and people are basically creatures of habit and behaviors. And a lot of people feel like habits and behaviors are the things that build culture. Our superpower is neuroplasticity. That is the way that we can rewire and reprogram our brains. That's the way we can help the people that we're working with rewire and make new connections in their brain. So that's kind of the key superpower of us all. A kind of antithesis to that is the stress circuit. It's very difficult to learn a new habit when you're stressed. You're in a fight or flight mode, and basically you're reacting. So your generative learning ability and your ability to grow new habits or to build new habits is very low. So the first principle of Total Brain Coaching is discover your energy state. Everyone is unique. Everyone has their own journey. And so we have an assessment, a VPK assessment based on body types. You can also use strength finders, Briggs. There's a lot of tools under this principle, but it's basically about figuring out who people are. Once you've done that, you harness your neuroplasticity and gut-brain axis, and that's why we called it Total Brain Coaching. There's a whole kind of new discovery that there's trillions of bacteria in your gut, and they have a huge effect on your brain. So balancing that is a big part of Total Brain Coaching. It's like in your brain, it's a highway, a habit. Say if you did waterfall for 30 years, it's like the highway. You're just starting Agile. It's like that little road to the right. You need to get the traffic out of the highway and into the little road, so that little road becomes the highway and the highway becomes the little road. The gut-brain axis, just so we're looking at it, it's a connection between the brain and this, as I mentioned, the gut bacteria, the trillions of gut bacteria. They can produce neurotransmitters, neurohormones, and that can affect you quite deeply. There's also super habits, and super habits are shortcuts. Gratitude is a super habit. Practicing gratitude every day changes a lot of other things in your physiology. There's a lot of research on that. So we looked for super habits. Another super habit is love. We're teaching a course right now. We just had a speaker, Stephen Farber. Love is just damn good business. And he basically said he trains companies and leaders to create environments so the employees love it, and then the customers love that product and that company. Meditation is one of the greatest super habits you can use, taking that inward stroke so that you can produce outwardly great action, having that moments of self-reflection like we heard about in other talks. All of these three things, love, gratitude, meditation, they are the things that build the habits so you can change your mindset. And by changing your mindset, you then start to reinforce the patterns that you want to live. And that is the unfoldment of your superpower, where you're changing your habits and behaviors to create new mindsets. The third principle is use the power of attention. Just like we tell our teams, focus on one thing at a time. When you're trying to change a habit, it takes an enormous amount of energy. It can take 20 days just to get the habit of drinking a glass of water. So be focused, singularity when you're practicing. Figuring your own inner rhythm. So diet, exercise, sleep patterns, maximizing those so you actually have the resources to build the new patterns in your brain. You need those resources to actually build new patterns. If you deplete yourself, you can't build. You need a lot of feedback to get from that big highway of waterfall to that little road of Agile. So self-coaching, like we just heard about, getting personal coaches, having group coaching, and also environmental coaching. You know, the whole co-locating factor was a big deal for getting people to practice Agile. The last two principles are continuous improvement and integration. So that's a lot of the kind of Agile, having these very fast feedback loops for generative learning. And anytime you're successful, celebrate. It's one thing we don't do enough. We got to celebrate. That's how you make those habits stick. This is a quick example of using it. So that number one is the assessment. We're trying to lose 10 to 15 pounds. We decide to stop snacking. We do a bunch of things to build up neuroplasticity. We have our 4 feedback loops: journal, coach, family, removing snack food, and we hit our weight and we celebrate. This is a great diagram. I was at the open space last year in Northern California with many of you. And after the talk I gave there, Pat Reed put this up, and she said at each level, total brain coaching is useful. And it was a wonderful moment for me and for that group. These are the 2 books that were written on this. It's Coherence Code is like a little bit like Phoenix Project, where it's a great story. We actually contributed some good stuff to that story. Thank you, we. And Total Brain Coaching is kind of the how-to guide. And if you want to see any more, just go to totalbraincoaching.com. We also have a course going right now. I'm happy to give anyone access. There's 14 lectures. Pat speaks in it. A number of other people speak in it. We're at a very high level. We will speak in it too, actually. Thank you so much for your time, everyone, tonight.
All right, great job. Thank you, Ted. All right, questions? Reflections, anything from anyone?
Yeah, I want to ask about the celebration. That's something I don't see enough teams and people do, or they just celebrate when there's something really, really big as opposed to other things. Can you expand on celebration techniques and ideas you've talked about? And
Yeah, so
Up. Is that like a bowl of ice cream?
This is me celebrating after this. Yeah, exactly. So like just recently, I'm working with a team and they don't celebrate at all. They just work 70 hours and they're burned out and they wonder, you know, the department wonders why they keep burning through people. So we took like a Friday lunch and we started watching, we do kind of Jackbox games. You know, I asked the team what they would like. We also watched a TV show, World's Toughest Race in Fiji. Then they learned about team building from that, but just giving them a break of time so that they can actually figure out who each other is, kind of like your presentation to be exact. I've done t-shirts. There's million things that I've done. I've done DoorDash for people that, you know, win something. I mean, we also do gongs. Like I do a dojo thing. So every time the team hits its goal, we do some hyper sprints. We hit that gong. These days, we're not quite doing it. I also built sort of videos of different moments during a dojo experience, and at the end of the celebration, put that together, and they kind of have that to remember their patterns and things like that. So those are some things I've done. I know you have lots of things too, Sherman, so it's good.
One thing that I've started is to do retrospectives where people are only allowed to learn from what went well and what they want to reinforce more.
Yeah, strengths, go with the strengths. It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Hutch. Hey, Ted, I was interested in the fact that you opened up your presentation with the Agile transformation discussion or involvement. The total brain coaching, is that at an individual level or is that for teams?
It's for individuals, teams, and organizations. So I've used it on all three of those levels. Again, you know, to really change culture, people have to change their habits and behaviors. But the reinforcement at the level of the team and the level of the organization is very, very important. So we talked about in that perfection talk, we talked about how the whole culture is reinforcing perfection. And that's why it's so hard to break out of. And you have to create spaces. What we find with organizations, and we've had some successes. I haven't had the opportunity to do, I've just been around for about a year, so it's mostly been practice on teams and departments. But we have one kind of experiment going through an organization where we train the leadership a thin slice from customer to CEO around one product. And if you can get that kind of coherence with that group, and you get the reinforcement of the habits within that group, then you create kind of a coherent piece. And that then starts to other coherent thin slices of the organization.
We call that a reference model.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Hutch.
All right, one last question. We got time for one last question. Anyone? Go ahead, Valerie.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late. So I didn't catch the full thing. But in talking about celebration and reinforcement, et cetera, of habits, I know you were mentioning on the team and celebrating as a team. Is there anything on the individual level? Looking at the responsibility process that I've been reading recently, he talks about, you know, when you beat yourself up for not having done something that you set out to do, you actually sort of reinforce or provide more resistance to actually achieving what you set out to do, even though you swear that next time you're not going to do it. And on the other hand, for every little intention, like if you did something that you intended to do and you did it, regardless of the outcome, but you did what you intended to do, that's you know, a win. You tell yourself that it's a win. And so you sort of provide the positive reinforcement as well as forgive the negative. So is in your model or methodology, is there a technique that you have for providing the same purpose?
So neurons that fire together, they wire together. So you'll watch sports teams, like, so you'll see when they celebrate, but it's the same on the individual level. If you set a goal for yourself and you make a little progress, like we were talking about this in this perfectionist talk, you know, celebrate the progress that you make and have something. I do Sometimes I do silly things like run around a building out here and cheer at the top of my lungs, and nobody can hear me. You don't have to be that extreme, or take yourself out. Have that. You do a lot of times. We do it where we do our morning exercise and we have that cup of coffee, and that's our celebration. Somebody mentioned that also in the talk. So you can do that if you can build positive habits, the reinforcement. Maybe it's not a cigarette or a coffee or something that we know is not going to build up neuroplasticity. I'm not saying things are good or bad. I'm just saying in terms of neuroplasticity, there's different kind of levels to it. You can reinforce it with things that will build your neuroplasticity. Then you're actually building to move that habit in the right direction even faster. So it's very personal. Celebration is quite personal, but do it. Whatever you do, do it. And the neurons will start firing, and then they'll wire together, and you'll start to move in that direction that you want to go.
All right, thanks, Ted. And I'd like to add, I've used this technique myself, and I think one of the easy ones that could be a little bit of candy for myself was like drinking a glass of water, something to kind of kickstart it with, to change some of the chemistry in the gut-brain axis as he talks about. So, all right, great talk. Thank you. Round of applause for Ted. Thank you. Wonderful.
So one of the things that I get asked a lot when I'm working with different Agilists is how to become an Agile coach. I've been doing this for a while now. I was on my first Agile team in my first job in 1999. I've been doing coaching stuff since 2005. And so I've been on this journey. And the very first thing that I tell everybody is it's not about becoming an Agile coach. It's about the act and the journey that it takes you on. And it's not about where you end up at the end, because there really is no end of this journey. We just keep going and going and going and learning through it. But at the very, very beginning, the one thing that you have to do before you can be an Agile coach is to be on a wildly, wonderfully successful team. You have to have been on a high-performing team to know what it feels like to help teams become high-performing. It could be any kind of team, but you need to be there. The second thing is be okay with failing spectacularly. You will learn far more from the missteps and the failures than you will from the successes. And if you're afraid to fail, then you're afraid to really succeed at a new level. So you have to become okay with it. And eventually you'll hit this tipping point, this place where you know that the only thing that you can do is to take on this work of coaching. You will see nothing else that you could possibly do right here and right now. And that's really the time that you are becoming an Agile coach. And that's when you need to find your why. Why do you want to embark upon this work? What is it that drives you? What is your originating intention? For me, it's helping people realize their power to change the world together. And then learn awesome stuff from awesome people. My journey took me through Agile Coaching Institute and working with David Chilcott as a mentor and as a coach, and through his coaching circles, which obviously got me involved here in BayALN. You learn stuff everywhere. Look for those opportunities and do it with other people. These are the humans who will be with you on your journey for years. This group of humans was in my Agile coaching cohort, and I still talk to them every month or two, at least one of them, often more. Find those humans and learn with them and stay connected with them. And have fun and spread joy. If you are having fun, the people and the teams and the organizations that you're coaching will have fun. And spread joy, create those communities, because that's how we get the work done and get through the really, really hard stuff. Practice. Do the same retrospective 100 times. Create 100 team alliances. coach 100 times. It's about practicing, whether it's for teams at work or other places. And once you've practiced, once you've done this, you'll know what your stance is. How do you stand as a coach? What are your values? What are important to you? What are the things that you use to help create transformation in the organizations and teams that you're working with? Understand what that is. And then find your thing. What is your niche? Every Agile coach I know has a different thing that is their specialty. It's somatic coaching and bringing in his music. Ted, it's his background in neurology. Me, it's games. Know that. And then practice some more. This is one of my favorite pictures. I knew I'd been practicing my coaching arc over and over enough times when my 5-year-old started playing Agile Coach with her uncle and is sitting and asking him powerful questions because she's heard me ask them of so many people on Zoom. Learn to love airports and traveling and moving between teams and groups of people, because you have so much to spread across the world and different places and organizations. Learn to really love that journey and sharing, and find your tribe. Find a group of humans who will be there to support you, because Agile coaching can be lonely and it can be hard. And when you're the person in the room that's looking at things differently than everybody else, you can really feel isolated. So find those people. Connect with them and care deeply with them, with your clients, and really bring that care to all of the humans who are on the teams that you're working with and in your communities. Because that care is what really helps inspire insights and change. And then you have to learn to let go. This is the only profession or position I've ever been in where my goal was to leave, where my goal was to work myself out of a job and no longer be needed. This is a group of some of my favorite humans who I've ever coached. And that's hard. And when you've let go, you really need to pay attention to caring for yourself. How will you put on your oxygen mask first and restore and rejuvenate yourself so that you can give and help others? And just keep moving forward. Keep going down the journey. Keep opening new doors and doing new things. This is my absolute favorite coaching quote. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. So stay curious. Thank you.
Thanks for a beautiful and inspiring talk, Emilia. Wow. Questions, reflections from anyone?
I've got one. I'm working for an organization that is just barely okay with having a Scrum Master as a job, not a Scrum Master / developer, not a Scrum Master / anything else, but hey, this is a real job. And then when I mentioned, what I do is actually more like an Agile coach, maybe we could call it that, they kind of flipped out. So I'm wondering what your advice is for articulating the value of Agile coaching and especially legitimizing it as a profession and a career to organizations that are scared of it.
Well, it's really about the act of coaching and the act of being a coach, not what your job title is. I mean, my current job title doesn't have the word Agile in it. But it's about that act. As a Scrum Master, part of your job is being an Agile coach, a huge part. And then when your team is doing really well, then there's the next team that wants help, and the next team, and then the leader notices and says, hey, I want some of the cool stuff that's over there. And the next thing you know, you're sitting in an executive's office having a conversation and coaching them.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the talk, Emilia. It just re-inspired me on so many different levels to kind of find your place where you can give the most and be happy, enjoy that and go for it. So thank you again.
I want to highlight the part about self-care. I mean, how much time I spend with organizations and teams that are in distress, and how much that distress, just how much of that I take on.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an ongoing struggle for me to kind of, how do I create those spaces for self-care and follow through on it? Maybe you have some words of wisdom or how you are doing.
It's super important, right? I mean, I will tell you that in 2019, in the organization that I was a part of, two of my good friends who are both Agile coaches, who were men in their 40s, had strokes from the amount that we give in this and then not taking enough back for ourselves. It's hard and it's important, and you've just got to prioritize it.
And not to sound too cheesy, but you do have to make a habit of it.
Yeah.
It was terrible. I apologize for that.
And it's one I work on a lot. And I've used Ted's stuff to work on it.
Volker, you're too precious not to do that, so please do that.
It's the truth. Nobody's here to take care of you. It's sort of like, I think we have our posse, we have our circle to support us, but ultimately, it's mental. It's like going to the gym mentally, right? But nobody can work out for us. We have to also take care of ourselves. Any other questions from anyone? Or reflections?
Well, I guess there was the talk of, it doesn't matter what your title was, you'll do the work and people will notice. And that resonated with me because I have had some success with that. But when I think about when I had the greatest success, it was actually, frankly, in like 2007. So kind of a while ago, as like a developer doing visibly good work with TDD and such. And then I had situations after that, where I was explicitly doing this sort of thing. But how do you find the organizations where you'll have, if it's not your title, how do you find the organizations where you will have where you're likely to be effective if it's not your title?
Yeah. Well, so I just made a move intentionally out of an organization, and every interview that I went on, I was looking at the organization and I was asking questions and figuring out, how did they think? And is this somewhere that I want to invest my time for the next, 3 to 5 years at least? And are these a group of humans that I want to work with and I want to spend 10 hours plus a day with? And there were places that I said no thank you to because they weren't those humans.
That's a version of self-care.
And a hard one at times, right?
Yeah.
All right, last question. I saw a hand up. Sasha, did you have something? Anybody else have a last question for Emilia? All right, let's give a round of applause for Emilia. Awesome talk, and continue to round up applause for everybody who spoke tonight, for stepping out and stepping into the light. And like each one of the talks they were all rich, and I'm impressed by what arrived in the room. And speaking about what arrived in the room, or in the virtual room, I want to say, I just want to give a moment, kind of like just to kind of let people think about over all the 5 talks that came tonight. Any big takeaways from anybody that you're willing to share with the group? Kind of like what resonated with you that you're gonna take home?
I'll share one thing, as long as my internet stabilizes, and that is, there was a real theme I felt in the different talks about self-care and knowing yourself, and we just really lose track of how important that is. But you can't really help others unless you're taking care of yourself. So that was really wonderful to see that. It was great. And I really enjoyed everyone's talks.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well put, Lisa. You know, for sure. +1 on that. Anyone else?
Emilia, when you talked about loneliness and being the only person in the room who's thinking that way, my heart just squeezed. Like, I feel that way all the time. Thank you for bringing that to us.
That's why I like this room with these humans. Come back to it.
Anyone else? Thanks, Susan.
Thank you for organizing it. I got so deeply inspired, and all the speakers are people who I also deeply care about. And I know from this group also being at that open space, there are some people that I deeply care about. So it's wonderful to be with family.
Yeah. Thank you, Ted. It's a privilege to set this up. I mean, it's really interesting from the facilitator's perspective, because like you guys, for the rest of you, like when I post these out and I was looking for volunteers, and these brave souls stepped up and they sent me like last week their presentations. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? I'm like, okay, well, you know, my motto has always been to tell everybody, including myself, self-coaching, and say, allow myself to be surprised. And it's just amazing how people come through on this. And it's like, oh wait, that's like jaw-dropping. I'm like, wow, each one of them were great, you know. So that's my reflection. I'm this community in particular continues to amaze me, and I'll put a blurb now. If you feel brave and you want to come up and speak, and you know, we want to hear your voice too. So get a hold of me. And we'll try and arrange another Pecha Kucha sometime in the future, because this hopefully won't be the last as well.
So thanks. So it was a different experience. It was the first time for me to present with the Pecha Kucha format, but it was fun.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thanks everyone for hosting us.
And for me, the pandemic has opened a whole new world, right? So I'm sitting in Edmonton, Canada, which is not a traditional, like a software market or an Agile market. So I run the Agile Edmonton group here. And now that everything has gone virtual, I'm attending and listening to talks all around the world, which is great for me. And I hope some form of it continues even in the post-pandemic world, right? So I wish that happens. Like otherwise, I have no chance of attending these meetups, or meeting you all, interacting with you all, and stuff like that. Right? So yeah.
It's a brave new world for sure. Anyone else?
Thank you, Coco folks.
Yeah, thank you. This is great. Good experiment.